and welcome to Gifted and Marginalized, presented by me, Cassy Thime.
When I think about gifted education, I think about my own journey as a gifted student, and that started in fourth grade. So by the time I was in fourth grade, I identified with various marginalized student groups, such as Black, family of immigrants, undocumented, low income, English as a new language, so I was also a struggling reader, and previously homeless. At that time in fourth grade, I would return to a school for the second year, which never happened before. So one day, my teacher, Ms. Haynes, stood in front of the class and she said, "We're going to have a special guest, and he's going to do an amazing math game with you. So I want you to give him your undivided attention." Of course, as a teacher would say, right? So then we would pack up and we waited for our special guest. So in came this man, Mr. Last. He had a deck of cards in his hand, and he said, "This is the 24 game. And the point of this game is that I need you to make 24 using the 4 numbers on this card. And you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide using each number. So do not skip a number, do not use a number twice." So he would work with us, and we would come up with a solution. So for this one, it will be 1 times 2 equals 2, 4 times 3 equals 12, and 12 times 2 equals 24. And then we will work through many cards similar to this, and by the end of his time, he collected 2 names of the highest performers, me and Frederick. So Frederick and I, we would go on to practice independently with Mr. Last, and eventually would have to face each other for a class representative, and I won. And then we needed a grade representative, and I won. And then we needed a district representative, and then I won. And then we needed a citywide 4th grade champion for the 24 game, in which I lost. But by that point, I was hooked. So the next year, in 5th grade, I would go through the entire process again, and I would come back as the 5th grade citywide 24 game champion. And then I would graduate out of 5th grade and into the 6th grade. My first day of 6th grade, I found out that I would be placed in a gifted education class. Unbeknownst to my mom, because she didn't apply, she didn't have the conversation with anybody, and I would know because I would be her designated translator. So that is my journey into gifted education. Now, we see a lot of news coverage about gifted education because of some controversy. A lot of critics look at it as a way to resegregate children. Also, they look at it as a way to separate children by race and class because of identification and pedagogical practices. So what are these practices? Now, for teachers are considered human-made gatekeepers. They are able to identify some of their students for gifted education services. Racial inequities exist in these referrals. A Black student taught by a non-Black teacher would have a 4 times less likelihood of being identified for gifted education than a similar student being taught by a Black teacher. In fact, Black students make up 19% of students in public schools for 2011. However, for gifted ed, they made up 10%, which is an underrepresentation of 50%. Hispanic students make up 25% of national percentage, but only 16% of gifted education, an underrepresentation amount of 36%. What happens when a student is low income or qualifies for gifted ed? Oftentimes, teachers do not associate these students with gifted education. They operate from a deficit perspective. They would look at these students as lacking the access, the ability, and the opportunity to handle a rigorous program such as gifted education. What happens with twice exceptional, which are students who receive special education services and also for gifted education while at the same time being a racial minority? Research on this is very underreported. Thinking about parents. 2 parents predominantly use gifted education. White parents and parents of high socioeconomic status. And the goal is the same, to separate their children from their mainstream public school peers. Oftentimes when it's a mixed race school, we will see that in a gifted education it's mostly filled with white students. And even if it's a homogenized school with only culturally diverse students, we will see that students whose parents are high socioeconomic status would also fill up these classes. So now let's talk about tests. Tests are used to identify students. Oftentimes they're promoted as unbiased and colorblind. However, their color blindness also leads to racial segregation of students based on how well they could do on these tests. So now there are many solutions for this. Currently there are initiatives that hope to increase teacher shortage because a predominant amount of teachers are white, middle class, and female. In the meantime, I will propose that we use the teacher force that we have right now to promote increase in representation of marginalized students. So, using the same 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 24 game, these are solutions that have been proposed by the expert of gifted and marginalization, Dr. Donna Ford. So 1, include re-evaluating your programs. Are the representation of your diverse students equal to the representation of the general population? And if not, work with your administrators. Be part of the problem and be very diligent to be the voice for these students. And also understand that equality is not the solution, it's equity. There are some students that need increased resources, and these are the marginalized students. 2, operate from a strength-based perspective. All students have strengths. What are they? How can you bring them out? How can you support them? Use additional resources to increase representation of some of your marginalized students in gifted education. 3, practice cultural humility, which is basically the awareness that there is no hierarchy when it comes to culture. Align yourself with people that are doing the work so that you can be aware and you can be part of the solution. And finally, 4, promote the reevaluation of identification strategies. So these include and are not limited to lowering of the standards of standardized testing threshold, especially for marginalized students, use of nonverbal assessments, and use of assessments that incorporate the lived realities of students. As you guys know, I am a promoter of STEM, and I see STEM and gifted education are intermingled. Oftentimes, gifted education students would go on to STEM backgrounds similar to myself. After I entered gifted education, I would go on to go into gifted programs, a specialized program for high school and college. I would go on to graduate with a bachelor's and a master's in a STEM field. At the same time, I understand that for every one person that gets identified for gifted education, such as myself, 4 students are excluded from these services and excluded from ultimately the STEM pipeline. So if you're interested in increasing STEM representation and innovation, then definitely consider increasing representation of your marginalized students in gifted education. Thank you.
Yeah.